Hey guys, Poro here with another video. This time, for the Grand Finals recap of MSI 2025, we have T1 versus Gen G, a battle between the two most storied organizations in League history. Both T1 and Gen G have been dominating the international scene since the early 2010s, and it would appear that as we cross into the late 2020s, nothing has changed. Heading into the tournament, I had Gen G as my favorites to win it all. After their 18-0 regular season, followed by their beautiful games 4 and 5 against HLE and LCK playoffs, I was convinced that Gen G was the pinnacle of League of Legends thus far. I had concerns that the LCK would start off rusty due to their short playoffs format, but was confident Gen G would be able to ramp up back to their peak form by finals. T1 on the other hand was not even necessarily supposed to be at this tournament after a very up and down winter and spring split, but something clicked in playoffs as they hit both KT and HLE with extremely dominant 3-0s. I was a little bit more skeptical of this team heading in, unsure if their short playoff spurt was going to be the new norm, or if it was just a random spike in performance that would go back down. As the two teams progressed, the situation became clear. Both Gen G and T1 had rocky starts to the tournament, but were able to improve with each series until now. Before the first match between Gen G and T1 began, I would have said Gen G will win the Grand Finals against both T1 and AL. After the T1 and Gen G series, I wasn't so sure, as T1 took Gen G to 5 games, and had a substantial lead in that game 5 before throwing it all away. After seeing the AL series yesterday, I decided at the last moment that I would flip-flop, and I predicted T1 winning it all with a 3-1 game score. For me, I thought both teams were improving over the course of the tournament, but at much different rates. Gen G has looked better in each series for sure, but I still have yet to believe that Kinen and Chovy have completely shown up. Meanwhile, T1 has been growing at an extremely rapid rate, and all 5 of their players appear to be in that same domestic playoffs form. It'll be exciting to see if T1 can hang on to this momentum, or if the force that is Gen G will finally snap all the pieces together and dominate. Game 1 of Grand Finals did not disappoint. For the first 11 minutes, we had a tense push and pull as objectives went back and forth and nobody was dying. Kinen was slowly building up a huge lead in the isolated 1v1, and the game pace seemed to be favoring Gen G. At second Drake, T1 finally got their first advantage, as Guma had an amazing flank position where he was applying a lot of pressure, and that flank, combined with the pressure for Ori's ball, led to T1 winning the fight. T1's next big play was around the Herald, and they caught Gen G on a bad rotation and was able to take 2 mid-turrets. Duro attempted to teleport to save the mid-turret and died, which at this point gave T1 a sizable lead. This was blown open even more as Kinen started playing dragon fights poorly, going too fast on some and too slow on others. Overall, the Jax was just not effective at all, whereas Faker and Guma kept having massive impact. One takeaway I had from this game is that even when his team is making mistakes, winning against Chovy's Talia looks annoying as hell. He was trying his best and had a lot of great teamfights and plays, but T1 was just 2 ahead and 2 on the same page to fold. It was a rather quiet game from both Canyon and Ruler, neither of which were able to have a real meaningful contribution to this one, likewise for Keria on the Alistar. Owner made a few great engages, but also had his fair share of bad ones as well. Game 2 never really felt close. I hate saying stuff like this in recap videos, but I think the draft from T1 was just really difficult to play. The entire comp is based around the Camille-Galio combo, but Camille is notoriously bad into Sion. She can't win early at all, and her true damage gets completely stonewalled by Sion's health stacking on side later. As expected, Kinen had his way for basically the entire game as Doran was completely useless. Despite T1 having a full dive comp, it's really difficult into Gen G's super tanky champions with Senna shields, Ryze Seraphs, Vi heals and shields. The list is just massive. The only oopsie from Gen G was at the Otacon fight, where Kinen didn't step into the Ryze Realm Warp, so Chovy ends up just getting one-shot in a pretty silly way. This didn't end up mattering though, as Gen G was able to close out every fight afterwards. Other than Doran, who got picked out before the 3rd Drake fight, I can't bring myself to knock anyone on T1. It felt like their comp was just ineffective regardless of how they played, and Gen G had a much easier time navigating the fights. Chovy was making great plays around the map, and Ruler was stacking like an absolute madman all game, and both were basically unstoppable. Their 1 deaths each were essentially Kinen's fault for that Otacon play, but Kinen did enough positive for me to not dock him for it. Game 3 was a masterclass from the T1 bot lane. They got a 2v2 kill early, but honestly it didn't end up impacting anything meaningful. Heading into the Herald fight, the game was dead even. Duro found a seemingly great ult at the Herald paired with the Equalizer, and honestly I don't think I can dock anyone on Gen G for that fight. They all played it fine. However, with the Nocturnal, Keria was able to find an insane 5-man ultimate, and T1 dominated the fight, swinging the gold to a 3k lead instantly. At this point, there's nothing for Gen G to do other than go for desperate fights to get back into the game, but nobody on T1 was breaking as they all played the fights well. I want to shout out Guma for playing the entire game super well on the Xayah. Him and Keria definitely carried this one. Nocturne ult made every fight easier for sure, but that's just owner's job, and it was the T1 bot lane who capitalized off of it. As for Gen G, I could see an argument for giving Doro a 2, but I don't want to lower anyone else because it really seemed like they played it well enough and just got gapped across the board. Game 4, and we finally get our first Zeri of the tournament. The early game was a jungle masterclass from both Canyon and Owner, as they were super proactive around the map and found great advantages for their teams. However, as we got into the teamfights, it was Gen G's bot lane who showed up bigger this time. Keria had a bad engage on Herald and got one shot before the fight started, and the solo laners for T1 were gapped. Faker couldn't seem to stay safe at any point, dying to ganks early and getting picked out before objectives later. Doran had a good looking gank outplay top with Owner, but then he missed every Q on the Skarner ult and failed to kill. He also had a horrible Otacon teleport where he lost most of his health bar for no reason. Even after Faker got picked mid, the situation was still fine. Both Ruler and Doro had ulted, and Faker's teleport was going to be up in 15 seconds. If Doran teleported to a better spot and T1 played the situation slower, they could have had a more favorable 5v5 with an ultimate advantage. Overall, it was just a clean game from Gen G, and probably T1's weakest game across the board this series with many simple mistakes. Game 5 looked scary coming out of draft. Gen G picked Nidalee and Misfortune, but had seemingly no engage options left to set up the MF, which forced them to go Pyke on 5. They were playing into Guma's Caitlyn, something that T1 had found a lot of success with. I was thinking the only way Gen G could win was if Chovy had some kind of legacy game due to the other champions having little synergy and little agency. T1 started out the game with a lead as Owner found some good early plays to get T1 ahead, and it was looking like the T1 script we all know well at this point. But this time it wasn't Chovy who needed to carry, as the rest of his team stepped up for him. Ruler had a great game, playing Misfortune to the limit. He pushed back Kate and Karma to set up a dive topside, where the T1 bot lane got wiped, and he had amazing ultimates in the ensuing fights, even through the Renekton Ahri Viego one-shot setups. As the game progressed, it was looking to end in classic Gen G fashion, as they hit T1 with the slow burn. Otacon, Baron, Mountain Soul, Gen G was getting everything and not giving T1 any angles in. Keen built up a large lead and used his body to zone T1 from objectives, making their advance so slow that nobody on T1 could get in to contest anything on time. Everyone else on Gen G didn't have to do anything extra to win this one, just play their champs the way they needed to be played. Ruler was absolutely huge. He was playing so aggressively to make sure he was dealing as much damage as possible. I'm a known Misfortune hater, but this is about as good as I've ever seen that champ look this year. With this, Gen G win back-to-back MSIs, and I will happily take the prediction L. Prior to finals, I thought Chovy wasn't playing well enough to overcome T1, and that the Gen G bot lane would be inconsistent, but both Chovy and Ruler stepped up huge this series and delivered some amazing games. It appears that Gen G figured out how to achieve their domestic form at the last possible moment. As for T1, I don't think they played finals badly at all. The most criticism you could give was Doran having a weaker last 2 games, but those games were pretty hard to play out for him, and he was definitely trying his best to make the comps work. If anything, the factor that made it the hardest for T1 to play this last game was their bot lane, who failed to make it work on the lane-dominant Caitlyn Karma duo. They weren't able to get any meaningful advantage early, and were actually slightly down gold when they went for the lane swap at 5 minutes. Then, instead of Keria coming to help Guma get any kind of top push, he left the Caitlyn to 1v1 against the MF as he went for Vision instead, which was why they ended up being diveable at all. Neither of the two were able to provide any value to the game whatsoever after this. That said, all 10 of these players came out and showed what they had, and it was a great final series to watch. I have a few plans for after this video releases. Like last year, I want to do a reflection video for the tournament where I go over my new team and player rankings and compare them to what I had before the tournament. I'll take a look at my draft meta read as well as to see how accurate it was, and I'll give my thoughts on who I thought the best performers overall were. I'm also thinking about doing some stuff on stream, like rating all the players who played in spring, and seeing who I think the top 10 or so players in each role are. Now that MSI is done, it's as good a time as any to take stock as how the scene looks before we head into Worlds season. I have nothing else for you all. It's been a great MSI, and I want to thank all of you for watching all of my team breakdowns and daily recaps. Last year I had to skip out on Worlds, but I really want to make sure I'm all in this year, regardless of how accurate or not I am. I'll see you all next time. Bye!